Hello and welcome to TVP World News. My name is Diana Skaya. On Tuesday, officials from Ukraine and the United States held another round of talks in the Saudi capital, the details of which will be announced shortly. Now, the meetings took place after the Trump administration held similar discussions with representatives of the Russian Federation on Monday. Now, the talks were announced by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said he expected his officials to meet U.S. negotiators again after they spoke on Sunday. Later, an anonymous member of Ukraine's delegation confirmed the news, saying that officials from Ukraine and the U.S. are holding a round of talks in Riyadh. The discussions reportedly revolved around a possible resumption of the Black Sea Initiative, an agreement that allowed millions of tons of grain and other food exports to leave Ukraine. At the previous round of talks this month in Jeddah, Kyiv agreed to a U.S.-backed 30-day truce that Vladimir Putin subsequently rejected. Now, today's meeting came after the United States held discussions with Russian officials on Monday. The session was supposed to result in a joint statement. However, today, in a last-minute move, Russian officials said the details of the meeting will not be published. In an interview with TVP World, General Ben Hodges has called for an increased leadership role for Europe, especially in the context of the current U.S. administration stance toward Russia and Ukraine. The former commander of U.S. forces in Europe and Africa also said that Chinese involvement in any future peace mission in Ukraine would make no sense.
I think this would be a colossal mistake by all of us, particularly the United States, to somehow allow the door to be open for China to come in and be a part of any sort of peacekeeping force. You know, the Trump administration before the election, all they talked about was China as being the main rival. And now you're talking about a situation where China would be able to come in and not only play a key role, but they could end up controlling the area with all the minerals and all the other economic factors. So, I mean, it just makes no sense from an American standpoint. But I think Europe here has to really assume the leadership role. If it looks like the United States is not going to do it, Europe is going to pay the price. The consequences of a terrible outcome in this war mean millions more refugees coming into Poland, Romania, Germany, and elsewhere. No rebuilding, continued disruption of grain shipments. All of this is bad news for Europe.
Senior officials from the Trump administration mistakenly included journalist Jeffrey Goldberg in an encrypted group chat discussing classified military plans for airstrikes against Yemen's Houthi targets. According to The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, he was added to a Signal group chat where officials discussed weapons packages, targets, and timing, seeing the plans nearly 2 hours before the strikes began.
On March 11th, Goldberg received a connection request on the Signal messaging app from a user identified as Mark Waltz. 2 days later, he received a notice that he was to be included in a Signal group chat called Houthi PC Small Group. At one point during communications over the strikes, J.D. Vance appeared to disagree with Donald Trump. Vance's account wrote, quote, "I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There is a further risk that we see moderate to severe spike in oil prices." Furthermore, Vance added he's willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to himself.
U.S. airstrikes on Yemen's Houthi rebels continued into early Tuesday, marking the 10th consecutive day of attacks. The strikes have targeted sites across the country, including one in the capital, Sana'a, reportedly killing at least 2 people and wounding over a dozen others.
The U.S. campaign is a part of a broader strategy by President Donald Trump to pressure the Houthi rebels who pose a threat to maritime trade and Israel, as well as to exert pressure on Iran, their primary backer. While the specifics of the targeted sites remain unclear, U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has claimed the airstrikes have taken out the key Houthi leadership, including their chief missile expert. The Houthis have not confirmed these claims, with the rebel group often downplaying losses while inflating their own attack successes, including attempts to target American warships.
Moving on now to the escalations in Turkey. Turkish authorities detained over 1,100 protesters, among them several journalists covering the ongoing civil unrest. Now, the protests in Turkey broke out after the arrest of Istanbul mayor and Recep Tayyip Erdogan's main rival, Ekrem İmamoğlu, on corruption charges.
Police in Turkey used water cannons, tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the demonstrators. The main opposition party has announced the protest will be held until Tuesday. On social media, Ekrem İmamoğlu called for peaceful protests and restraint from the police.
Dear young people, stay away from conflicts. Be good to our security forces, police officers, and people whom I love very much. Let me see you all with smiling faces tonight. The nation is great.
İmamoğlu is not the only jailed official in Istanbul. 47 of his allies and associates, including district mayors of the city, have been jailed pending trial, and the Ankara mayor's office faces scrutiny over alleged public fund misuse. The government has defended the crackdown. The Turkish interior minister has said the detainees have ties to criminal and terrorist organizations, while President Erdogan over the weekend blamed the opposition for provoking the unrest.
In a recent address, President Zelensky condemned the latest Russian attacks on the Sumy region of Ukraine, which have wounded nearly 90 people, including 17 children. He stressed that Russia must be held accountable and forced to peace, emphasizing that the war, which has brought immense suffering to Ukraine, must end.
There are many casualties at this time, nearly 90 wounded, including 17 children. At the epicenter of the strike there is a school and residential buildings, and fortunately the children were moved to a shelter. I am grateful to everyone who is helping people and to all those who are saving the lives of Ukrainians. Every day and night, as Russian rockets and drones rain on our country, every single day of the war brings losses, pain and destruction that Ukraine never wanted. The war was brought here by Russia, and it is Russia that we must push to end the war. They must be forced into peace. Pressure must be applied to them in order to ensure safety. I thank everyone who is helping us in this. I thank everyone working for the safety of Ukraine, for the protection of our people, and for the defense of our cities.
The latest data on the number of Ukrainian children killed since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion is standing at 604, according to the Office of the Ukrainian Prosecutor General. Yet the number of children who have been injured and psychologically scarred is far higher. The prosecutor's statement declares more than 2,421 children have suffered in Ukraine as a result of Russia's full-scale armed aggression, including 604 killed and over 1,800 injured of varying severity. Additionally, over 19,000 have been deported or forcibly transferred to Russia or Belarus. And the occupation has caused large-scale human rights violations and enormous suffering of millions of children, and the real figures are likely much higher. During the reporting period, at least 1,600 attacks destroyed or damaged schools, Ukrinform had noted. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported that Ukrainian Air Force strikes targeted a Russian troop concentration in Kondratkova in the Kursk region on March 25, killing up to 30 Russian soldiers reportedly. Now, Ukrainian sources claim that the strike successfully destroyed the target and confirmed that Ukraine's pilots and troops will continue operations to weaken Moscow's military strength. Reportedly, operations are expected to focus on Kondratovka, a rural community near the Ukrainian border in western Kursk, which remains a focal point of ongoing fighting. Now, this attack follows a Ukrainian cross-border incursion into the region in August 2024 and a Russian counteroffensive earlier this month that led to the recapture of Sudzha. Now, while President Donald Trump has repeatedly stated that Ukrainian forces are, quote, surrounded in the Kursk region, Ukrainian officials have denied these claims, confirming only a withdrawal from Sudzha. Russia has begun previously scheduled military drills featuring its RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The exercises, announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense, are taking place in the Sverdlovsk and Altai regions of central southern Russia.
The RS-24 Yars is a long-range missile with a range up to 11,000 kilometers and the ability to carry 3 to 6 independently targetable nuclear warheads, each with a yield of 150 to 300 kilotons. The drills are part of a broader inspection of Russia's strategic rocket forces, which began this week. During the exercises, military units will conduct command and staff drills, as well as perform tasks involving engineering support, protection against radiation, and defense against chemical and biological weapons.
Tuesday marks 4 years since the arrest and detention of Polish-Belarusian journalist and human rights activist Andrzej Poczobut in Belarus. Now, authorities in Minsk sentenced him to 8 years in prison for, quote, inciting hatred.
Poczobut, who is a Polish and Belarusian citizen, has been in prison in Belarus since his arrest in 2021. According to Minsk, the journalist, through popularizing Polish culture in the country, attempted to shed a positive light on Nazism. His trial began behind closed doors in January 2023. In February, the court sentenced Poczobut to 8 years in a strict penal colony. Since then, he has been held in the Novopolsk facility, which has the reputation of being one of the harshest in the country. While he appealed the sentence, the motion was denied by the Belarusian Supreme Court. According to available information, before the trial began, Poczobut declined an opportunity to avoid prison time in return for leaving the country for good.
And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya, and stay tuned with us for more news and features.